January 1945, the Netherlands. The river air is heavy with winter fog, pressed low against ruined brick and frozen mud. Gunfire has faded into distance, leaving only the soft crack of burning timber and the slow creak of collapsing beams. Somewhere beyond the smoke, German units are pulling back in fragments, exhausted but still dangerous. A single Canadian infantryman moves through the dark. His uniform is soaked. He is bandaged. Blood has dried stiff along his sleeve. He is not running. He is listening. A sudden command breaks the silence. German voices. Close, weapons raised. In the narrow street, escape disappears in an instant. He is surrounded, disarmed, and pushed forward at rifle point. The war has reduced him to a number now, another prisoner in a winter that devours men without memory. But his face shows no fear, no panic, not even anger. The soldiers watching him notice something unsettling, a calm that doesn't belong to a captured man, a stillness that suggests calculation rather than surrender. Even as he is searched, even as hands grip his shoulders, his eyes stay alert, measuring distance, movement, timing. In this frozen moment, between capture and consequence, Europe's war presses in, and to understand how a single man could turn this moment inside out, the world that led him here must come into focus. By January 1945, the war in Western Europe had entered a brutal, grinding phase. The liberation of France was complete, but victory was nowhere near clean. The German army, though battered, remained lethal, defensive, disciplined, and fighting on terrain it knew would soon be lost. Across Belgium and the Netherlands, the front lines twisted through flooded fields, shattered towns, and frozen canals, where movement itself became an enemy. The Allied advance had slowed after the failure of Operation Market Garden in September 1944. The bold attempt to seize key bridges in the Netherlands collapsed short of its final objective, leaving large parts of the country still under German occupation. Dutch civilians endured hunger, reprisals, and a winter that would later be called the Hunger Winter, a season of starvation and silent deaths. In response, German forces fortified urban strongpoints. Small towns were turned into defensive nests, held by exhausted units ordered to delay the inevitable at all costs. Snipers occupied upper floors. Machine gun teams controlled narrow streets. Patrols moved constantly, hunting Allied scouts and raiders before they could identify weaknesses. Among the Allied units pressing forward was the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, veterans of Normandy, the Scheldt, and months of relentless fighting. These men were not advancing in sweeping maneuvers anymore. They moved block by block, house by house, often at night, often alone, often alone. Canadian doctrine relied heavily on reconnaissance patrols, small teams sent forward to probe German positions, capture prisoners, and return with information. These missions were quiet, dangerous, and unforgiving. Capture meant interrogation. Injury meant abandonment. Mistakes were rarely survived. It was within this environment that Corporal Leo Major, a French-Canadian from Quebec, operated. By early 1945, Major was already a seasoned soldier. He had landed in Normandy on D-Day, survived intense urban fighting, and earned a reputation for independence bordering on insubordination. He followed orders, but not always methods. Months earlier, a phosphorus grenade explosion had destroyed the sight in his left eye. From that moment on, Major fought with a black patch over his damaged eye. Depth perception altered, instincts sharpened. German forces soon learned to fear lone movement in the dark. A single figure could mean an entire unit advancing unseen. In the confusion of winter combat, certainty vanished quickly. Shadows became threats. Silence became pressure. As January deepened, Allied command sought to break remaining German resistance in key Dutch towns. Intelligence was incomplete. Resistance was unpredictable, and the war increasingly depended not on grand offensives, but on individuals willing to step into the dark alone. That is where Leo Major was headed when he was captured, and that is why what followed would echo far beyond that frozen street. Leo Major did not come from a military family. He was born in 1921 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and raised in Montreal during the lean years of the Great Depression. His childhood was defined by movement, labor, and resilience rather than ideology. He learned early how to work alone, how to endure discomfort, and how to rely on his own judgment when authority failed to provide clarity. When Canada entered the war in 1939, Major did not enlist immediately. He watched, waited, and finally joined the Régiment de la Chaudière in 1940, a French-Canadian infantry regiment that would become part of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. Training was rigid, but Major's temperament was not. He absorbed tactics quickly, but questioned restrictions instinctively. Superiors noted his marksmanship, his patience, and his unusual calm under pressure. By the time Allied forces landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944, Major had already distinguished himself as a reconnaissance soldier. During the landings near Juno Beach, chaos dominated the shoreline. Mines, artillery, burning vehicles. In the confusion, Major captured a German armored vehicle and its radio equipment, returning it intact. It was an early indication of how he approached war, not with brute force, but with opportunity. The injury that cost him his left eye occurred weeks later. During a clearing operation, a German phosphorus grenade detonated near his position. Most soldiers would have accepted evacuation. Major refused. He argued that depth perception mattered less than discipline. Command, desperate for experienced men, relented. From that point forward, Major became increasingly involved in independent patrols. These missions often involved moving ahead of Canadian lines at night, identifying German positions, capturing prisoners, and disrupting communications. He preferred operating alone, believing multiple men created noise and hesitation. Alone, he could move faster, think clearer. By January 1945, the Canadian advance toward northern Dutch towns placed enormous pressure on German rear guard units. Supply lines were failing. Morale was eroding. Orders from Berlin demanded resistance even when defeat was obvious. This created a volatile environment where German soldiers were alert, tense, and prone to overreaction. For a lone Allied scout, capture in such conditions was not just dangerous, it was potentially fatal. Interrogation could be swift and violent. Escape required timing, boldness, and an understanding of enemy psychology. Leo Major understood all three. The Winter War rewarded those who controlled fear rather than surrendered to it. And in the streets of the Netherlands, where darkness blurred the line between hunter and hunted, Major had learned how to weaponize uncertainty itself. That understanding would soon be tested, not in planned combat, but in the moment when capture became an opportunity rather than an ending. War compresses personality. Under constant threat, most soldiers narrow their focus to survival and obedience. Leo Major reacted differently. Witness accounts and after-action reports describe a man who appeared almost detached in moments of danger, not reckless but internally calm. This was not bravado. It was control. He did not rush decisions. He waited for conditions to form around him. When captured, this psychological posture mattered. Fear invites aggression from captors. Panic escalates violence. Major displayed neither. German soldiers saw a wounded man, alone, no immediate threat. That perception created space, seconds where attention drifted, where discipline softened. German rearguard units in early 1945 were under extreme stress. They faced constant Allied probing, artillery harassment, and air superiority. Sleep deprivation was common. Rumors of encirclement spread faster than orders. In such an environment, uncertainty was corrosive. Major understood that confusion could be more powerful than gunfire. His previous patrols had relied on sudden movement, unexpected angles, and the illusion of larger forces. Germans responding to one noise often assumed many attackers. A single soldier behaving confidently could unbalance an entire squad. Urban winter combat offered narrow corridors of movement. Streets funneled men into predictable paths. Rubble limited visibility. Snow absorbed sound. When weapons were discharged, echoes distorted direction. A soldier who knew how to move between cover, doorways, stairwells, alleys, could vanish instantly after contact. Captured soldiers were often guarded casually once removed from immediate danger, rifles slung, fingers relaxed. In that moment between threat and routine, opportunity existed. For most prisoners, that moment passed unnoticed. For Leo Major, it was measured. His situation was not unique in war, but his response was, and it reveals how individual psychology, enemy fatigue, and battlefield geometry could align to create outcomes that seemed impossible in hindsight. Those same forces would converge violently in the seconds that followed his capture. By the winter of 1945, German infantry units defending Dutch towns were often composites, remnants of divisions, newly conscripted youths, older reservists, and veterans held together by rigid orders rather than morale. These soldiers were trained to expect Allied patrols, but not audacity. Lone movement was usually interpreted as reconnaissance, not attack. Captured Allied soldiers were processed quickly when possible. Guards assumed superiority in numbers. They assumed compliance. In darkness and fatigue, assumptions replaced vigilance. That miscalculation would prove critical. Canadian command culture valued initiative, but within limits. Major operated at the edge of that tolerance. He disobeyed when he believed speed mattered more than procedure. Superiors alternated between frustration and reliance. He delivered results, prisoners, intelligence, disruption, often with minimal explanation of how. This independence meant he was not psychologically bound to expected outcomes. Capture did not equal failure in his mind. It was a temporary condition. Escape was not desperation. It was simply another maneuver. There is a moral tension in solo combat. Without witnesses, actions become personal. Responsibility is immediate. Major's record shows efficiency rather than cruelty. His focus was movement, neutralization, and momentum. He did not linger. He did not celebrate. War reduced decisions to seconds. In those seconds, emotion could slow action. Major suppressed it. That did not make him inhuman. It made him effective. These angles intersected in a narrow street under winter fog, where German soldiers believed control had been established. In reality, they were standing at the edge of a reversal they would not understand until it was already complete. That reversal would begin not with shouting or struggle, but with timing. The moment does not explode. It tightened. Leo Major is being moved along the street, boots crunching softly over frost and broken glass. The German soldiers around him are close, but not alert. Rifles are carried low. Their attention is forward, already shifting to the next task. In their minds, the danger has passed. Major walks with his head slightly lowered, not in submission, but to watch feet, spacing, rhythm. He counts steps. He notes the distance between the men. He listens for breath, for fabric, for the small sounds that betray readiness or distraction. Then the formation compresses. A doorway narrows the street. Two soldiers step ahead. One falls slightly behind. It is the smallest break in symmetry, but it is enough. Major moves. His hands rise fast, controlled. He does not shout. Surprise is his first weapon. A rifle is seized and redirected in one motion. The sound of the first shot fractures the quiet, amplified by stone walls and fog. In confined space, direction becomes meaningless. To those nearby, it sounds like an ambush. Major does not stay still. He moves immediately, laterally, firing and shifting, using shadows and angles he already memorized. German soldiers react instinctively, turning toward noise, shouting warnings, returning fire toward echoes that no longer correspond to position. In close quarters, seconds stretch and compress simultaneously. Orders overlap. Men collide. Visibility collapses. Snow kicks up with each step, obscuring feet, breaking lines of sight. Major reloads without pause. He advances, not retreats. Every movement suggests intention, not escape. To the Germans, this does not feel like a prisoner breaking free. It feels like the opening of a coordinated assault. They do not see one man. They feel many. This is where confusion becomes lethal, not because of numbers, but because of tempo. Major controls it. He fires, moves, disappears, reappears. Each sound arrives from a different place. Each second denies the enemy time to think. Within moments, the street is no longer controlled by the men who captured him. It belongs to momentum. And momentum, once seized, does not ask permission to continue. The German response fractures under pressure. Shouted commands collide with gunfire and echo uselessly off brick and rubble. In the fog, silhouettes appear and vanish before weapons can be properly aimed. Each man reacts to his own threat, no longer anchored to a shared picture of the fight. Major uses that fragmentation deliberately. He does not chase fleeing soldiers. He cuts across their movement, striking where they converge rather than where they retreat. In confined urban terrain, retreat funnels men into predictable paths. Corners, doorways, intersections. Major positions himself to intercept. Time loses clarity. What follows is not a prolonged battle, but a violent compression of action. Decisions stacked back to back without pause. Weapons discharge at close range. German soldiers fall or scatter. Some attempt to regroup, believing they are under attack by a larger force pushing in from multiple angles. They are wrong. Major moves through the street methodically, clearing it in stages. When ammunition runs low, he resupplies from fallen weapons without breaking rhythm. His injured eye does not slow him. At close distances, precision comes from muscle memory and instinct rather than optics. German resistance collapses not from annihilation, but from shock. The certainty of control dissolves. In war, certainty is stability. Without it, even trained soldiers hesitate. Within less than a minute, the street falls silent again. Only this time it is not the silence of capture. It is the silence of aftermath. Bodies lie where confusion overtook discipline. Survivors have withdrawn blindly, reporting contact with an unseen force. Major does not linger. He understands the nature of what he has created. Noise draws reinforcement. Shock fades. He moves before the battlefield can reorganize itself. He disappears into the fog as abruptly as he emerged from it, leaving behind a German unit that cannot accurately explain what just happened, or how a prisoner transformed into an assault in the span of seconds. But the effects of that moment do not remain contained to one street. They ripple outward. Towns that might have held longer fell faster. Officers reconsidered the vulnerability of small units, and whispered accounts of a lone attacker circulated through units already under siege. The event underscores a persistent truth in warfare. Decisive action often does not depend on force alone, but on timing, audacity, and understanding the enemy's mind. What Leo Major achieved in a single street that night resonated far beyond the immediate casualties. It reshaped operations, influenced planning, and reminded both sides that in war, human skill and psychology can outweigh conventional measures of strength. And as the sun rose over the frozen Dutch town, clearing smoke and fog, the stage was set for the final campaigns of the European theater. Lessons from that night would echo in battles to come, shaping decisions in ways that few outside the front lines would ever understand. In the quiet aftermath, the street remains scarred. Frost clings to shattered bricks. Spent shells litter corners. Footprints trace a path that few would ever map completely. For those who study war, such moments are often reduced to numbers. Casualties, distances, times. But the truth is more subtle. The significance lies in what one person can do when fear, discipline, and opportunity intersect. Leo Major's night in the Netherlands was not about heroics. It was about clarity, understanding the environment, anticipating human reaction, acting decisively when hesitation would have been fatal. He transformed captivity into advantage, confusion into control, and a single encounter into an event that shifted an entire operational picture. This is the paradox of war. Scale and individuality coexist. Battles are vast, with thousands of soldiers, tanks, and artillery pieces. Yet sometimes one soldier moving alone, thinking ahead, seeing what others do not, can create an outsized effect. It is in these moments that history, strategy, and human instinct collide. And while the frozen streets would thaw and the echoes of gunfire fade into memory, the lesson endures. Courage is not the absence of fear. Precision is not the absence of danger. And war, for all its machinery, ultimately remains a human endeavor, shaped by perception, timing, and the choices of those willing to act when certainty has vanished. In that sense, Leo Major's night was more than a tactical success. It was a reminder. History often turns not on armies, but on the individuals who seize fleeting opportunities. And for one winter night in the Netherlands, reshaped the battlefield in the span of less than a minute.